Hello everyone. Let's talk Ayurveda today. I've decided to do a series of introducing the Ayurvedic concepts and how they apply to your life or how they can apply to your life and living in terms of nutrition, lifestyle, your environment, the clothes you wear, relationships you form, and so on. So let's talk definition of Ayurveda. As we know, or as most of us or you know, is Ayurveda is translated as the knowledge of life. It originates from India thousands of years ago. It looks at well-being from a holistic perspective, taking into consideration your physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and energetic well-being. So the relationship with yourself, your physical body, and all the subtler bodies, but also your relationship with your environment, how you communicate with your environment is determined by those five elements. So how do we understand them? When I talk about five elements, it's again space, air, fire, water, and earth. Those five elements, they can be understood. The best way of how you can understand those elements, think about the relationship between these elements. So let me just give a couple of examples. What is the relationship between air and fire? First of all, what do I mean by the element of air? Thinking about it like this, lifestyle, for example, or what does the wind do? Air/wind. What does it do? The wind changes its direction constantly. When we are permanently exposed to wind, it can dry out the body. It can clear our mind. That's the dynamic of the air element. But what happens if we are exposing ourselves too much to the element of air? For example, irregular lifestyle, constantly changing, no routine, no rhythm. Also thinking about air in terms of the quality of dry, cold, moving, changing, and all of that. So having foods that are dry, for example, is linked to or can aggravate the element of air. So that's air. The next thing is, let's look at fire. Fire, heat. Physiologically, of course, we know all the digestive processes are linked or can be linked to fire. Digestion, metabolism, inflammatory processes, for example, all those, sharpness, clarity of the mind, all those are actually linked to the element of fire. Now, what happens when we bring these two together? So think about it this way. If you have a lifestyle where there's too much air, in fact, we live in an air society, too much of change constantly, information-based society, faster, quicker, process information, more information, nobody has patience anymore. All these are indicators of an aggravated dynamic of the element of air. So when this air/wind blows into the fire, what does it do? There are two options. The air can blow out the fire if the fire is not strong enough, but it can also increase the fire. Blow out the fire, again, think about what I have said before. If the wind is too strong, it can reduce your metabolism, for example. If it is too much, it can aggravate your metabolic rate. That means it can lead to inflammatory processes. It can lead to acidity in the body. So in this way, we understand a little bit about the dynamics of air and fire. Now look at the dynamics of fire and earth. Earth is the quality of solid, heavy. It's totally the opposite to the air element. So if air is dry, then earth element is quite heavy, it's quite unctuous or oily or solid. Air is light, earth is solid. So the earth elements are totally opposite. Now what happens when we put the dynamics of the fire to the earth? Heat. What does heat do to the earth? Think summer in a desert. Logically, it dries out the body. So excess heat can reduce, for example, the fluid content in our body, because the earth element is represented by the fluids. For example, it's represented by the lymphatic system. So excess of fire can reduce that. Excess of fire can lead to tissue depletion from an Ayurvedic perspective. So this is sort of a little bit of giving you an idea of how we look at those elements of space, air, fire, water, and earth. And now I've given a few examples. You as a human being are basically your makeup is made out of a combination of those 5 elements. For example, if the element of space and air combines with fire and water, that is a different dynamics. Or if your constitution or your body, for example, is made out of the element of fire and water and some element of earth, that means you function differently, you think differently. Fire, think also about your logical mind, your analytical mind, sharp thinking, whereas the air element, relating it to the mind, air, wind, changing, imagination, creativity. This is where creativity comes in. And earth, for example, thinking about the mind, calmness, stillness of the mind. So this is how we can, for example, relate those 5 elements to some of the functions. Ayurvedically, this is slightly simplified into the concept of the 3 doshas, or the 3 constitutional principles. So air and space forms the element of vata, then fire and water forms the element of pitta, water and earth forms the element of kapha. So in a simplified version, we can bring down those 5 elements into those 3 constitutional types. Personally, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, I choose to look at my patients' well-being on a physical, mental, emotional or spiritual level from the perspective of the 5 elements. I like to stick to the 5 elements because I believe it suits me better, because I can be a little bit more precise and trying to detect which of the elements is out of sync. Of course, these elements again are always can always be connected to those 3 constitutional types or doshas. And if you Google Ayurveda, I'm sure you will find everywhere those Ayurvedic questionnaires. What is your constitutional type? Is it vata, pitta or kapha? Now, first of all, we are never just one of those constitutional types or doshas in Ayurveda. We are always a combination of them. And I find personally those questionnaires quite tricky, because the way you are today might be, or is very likely to be, completely different to the way of how you have been, let's say 20 years ago, shaped because of our education, our lifestyle, our genetic factors, and so on. So sometimes those questionnaires can be misleading. So that's why I say it's a good exercise to do if you're able to do that. And if you want to have your Ayurvedic questionnaire, so please message me privately. I can send you a questionnaire via email, so you can fill in your questionnaire with the codes to get an understanding roughly of where you're at. But please take those questionnaires with a pinch of salt. It's not the end of the story. It will just give you a rough guideline of where you are. So I think that's it for the first day. So again, today we have looked at the 5 elements, some of the qualities of the 5 elements, how they translate into the 3 constitutional types Ayurvedically. So these 5 elements can be superimposed to all aspects of our life, our living, our relationship, and so on. So watch out. Till next week. Ciao, ciao.